my first question will be for Professor Lyons. Clearly, matters like congestion pricing, reducing congestion and emissions is sort of like joined at the hip with our ability to provide reliable public transportation. And all of this is sort of like a very deep pocket problem, right? How do we get the finance to promote public transportation and reduce emissions and congestion? And you mentioned, for example, congestion pricing, which has been around for some time in London, but there's also the tolling of roads and bridges and obviously increasing the gas tax. Which do you see to be the most effective means of capturing the revenue to finance an important project to reduce congestion and emissions and to create greater and greener and more reliable means of public transportation?
Well, thank you for the question, and I'd be happy to follow up with some written testimony that gives more details. But my first thought on this is that a VMT tax is very promising in terms of its ability to raise revenue. It's probably going to be more successful than a congestion tax just because congestion is a more localized phenomenon. And there's been some research suggesting that a VMT tax could be very effective in revenue raising. So I would say let's start with that anyway.
And how has the congestion pricing program worked in London?
Oh, I think it's been very effective in terms of reducing congestion, increasing average speeds, and those things reduce fuel consumption, which reduces pollution, because there's a lot of pollution that occurs from trucks and cars just being stalled in traffic.
Ms. Arroyo, my next question is to you. You referred to green infrastructure. There are communities across America, particularly urban communities, where you see very high levels, for example, of asthma amongst children and other respiratory diseases. Now, if we are going to go ahead with a green infrastructure, the first question is, do we have the workforce ready and prepared to take on that job? And the second question is, if we do have the workforce available, are we willing to develop a workforce that will then, in those particular neighborhoods that have been adversely affected by this phenomenon, right? The problem with asthma and other respiratory illnesses. Are we willing to provide a level of reparation for those communities that have been adversely affected and create jobs, in many cases, prevailing wage jobs for young people and other people in those neighborhoods?
Thank you for the question. So a lot of communities that we work with from around the country are interested in some of the benefits of investing in what's called green infrastructure from both a urban heat island mitigation standpoint, to have cooler roofs, permeable pavements, more trees, urban canopy, and things like that. But also because they're a place for the water to flow. So when we do see some of these heavier rain events like we're seeing now in this era of climate change, there's a place, for example, water gardens that are being installed in my mother's old neighborhood of Gentilly, which is a very racially mixed, largely elderly population in that community. So some of the places that have not rebuilt in terms of homes, they're having places for water to go, but also places where people can recreate and have co-benefits from that, which will also contribute to better local air quality, better resilience from conventional rain events, job opportunities, training opportunities. This is something that, for example, the DC government has worked on in a partnership with folks that have been underemployed and trying to train them in a program called DC Water Works, which is sort of like like a little play on words, to try to train people to install things like solar panels over reservoirs and things like that. So it's very much something that's of interest to a lot of the cities that we work with, including my own hometown of New Orleans.
Do we have the workforce right now? Let's say if this is to happen a year from now, are we ready? Are we ready to take this on?
I mean, I think it would be a wonderful thing for the committee to consider investing in, because this really can create local jobs that cannot be exported. And this can happen in every community. Where I live now in Arlington, Virginia, there's a lot to be done in terms of urban forestry to counteract some of the kind of, cutting down of the mature trees to build some of the kind of big houses that tend to be what developers do right now. And so I think that it's just a wonderful solution, and it can train a workforce for sustainable employment and something that everybody can be proud of.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.